Hello, BookTube, and welcome to another episode of Throwdown Thursday. This is a video in which I patiently, calmly, dispassionately watch the video by another booktuber and then make my own response in which I say all the ways in which they are wrong, 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 wrong about literally everything, literally all the time. OMG. And today I'm doing, this time around, a video called Reading Enjoyment by my sister from another mister, my Canadian spirit animal, Sarah from the Bookish Knitter, a wonderful booktube channel. I'll leave a link down below. I'll leave a link to all the victims of Throwdown Thursday. And she did a video called Reading Enjoyment that was wonderful. And you should all go to watch it because it's got tons of food for thought. And I want to make a response to a bunch of things in it, but my response is going to be a little disjointed because her video was a little disjointed. And that is because Sarah is the same kind of booktuber that I am. She might have bullet points. She might have a framework in mind before she hits record for videos, but she's mostly talking to you, just mostly talking and following her own reasoning from, point A to point B to point C. Which means that her videos can be rambly in the most wonderful way possible. So, and this video of hers rambled just a little. I have a few points that I want to address. The first of which was something that I would like to think was a conscious joke on her part. I certainly laughed. She mentions at one point that she's a creature of routine. She loves her routines. That's not meant to sound stagnant. If you watch her channel, you know that she's a creature of routine, but she does change up her routines. But she mentions in connection with being a creature of routine that if you were to disrupt one of her routines, she would really read you the riot act. She would let you know. And then she stops and says, just kidding, guys. I wouldn't actually say anything out loud. I'm not that way. And I laughed out loud at the screen because I've had the dubious honor of being in the passenger seat on a highway while Sarah was driving in traffic. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that occasionally her self-control is overcome by the need to express her opinion to someone she's irritated. I have seen that happen in harrowing terms, so I know that it's true, and so that little element made me laugh a little. Then there was another part of the video that was a Gauntlet. She'd put on her argument-starting hat, looked straight at the camera, and said something that she clearly was expecting pushback from, and I want to give her that expected pushback. She says at one point in her video that listening to audiobooks is reading. And I want to respond by saying, of course it's not. Of course it's not. If listening to audiobooks were reading, they would be the same thing. They are two different things, which is why Sarah herself in her own video talks about them as different things, fundamentally different things. When you read a book silently to yourself, you are doing all of the ancillary creative work. You are supplying the voices. You are supplying the pauses, the intonations. You are supplying the emphasis in long descriptions of topography or action or whatever. You're supplying all of that. The author will do quite a bit, but there's still a lot that you have to do. You're fleshing these things out in your mind. When you listen to an audiobook, you are not doing any of those things. You surrender those things and you can't do them. It's not just that you're not doing them because the narrator of the audiobook is doing them. It's that you can't do them. If the narrator of the audiobook is making some stuck-up executive sound like the narrator's Canadian idea of a stuck-up executive, when if you were reading the book silently to yourself, you would be supplying Alan Rickman's voice. You're going to hear the narrator's version of that stuck-up executive. You're not going to hear Alan Rickman. I doubt that anyone even has the concentration to go back once the audiobook is over and in their mind overlay Alan Rickman's voice. No, it's always going to be that. It's always going to be the way you heard it. Same thing with the pacing of dialogue. Was a line said quickly or slowly? Usually book narrators, unless the author of the book specifically notes in the text that someone is speaking slowly or quickly, usually audiobook narrators make a point of having everyone speak at the exact same pace and intonation. And that becomes your pace and intonation. Those are two different things. I would argue that the way that a book makes you a silent partner when you're reading it, a silent partner in the creativity of the author, since we're talking about novels here, I would argue that is a strength to reading silently that audiobooks lack. They don't have that strength. But on the same token, with an audiobook, you're listening to usually one solitary narrator tell you this story. That is a very personal connection. It feels a lot like an atavistic throwback to listening to stories around a fire at night. A lot of audiobook listeners will listen to their audiobooks when all the lights are out in the bedroom, when all the house is quiet. That can't help but be interpreted as by your brain as someone telling you a story. That's an extremely intimate bond. You hear it with audiobook aficionados. They'll say, there are some narrators I love so much, I've gone and found them narrating all other books, including the kinds of books I don't usually read, just because I want them talking to me. That is an element that isn't present to that extent in fiction, even when the fiction has a very well realized first-person narrator. That's a whole other level of intimacy. You have to sacrifice some things to get it. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's an even trade-off. They aren't the same thing, though. And I think the reason that Sarah was getting a little combative on the subject is because she was feeling defensive about the snobs out there who think not only that listening to an audiobook and reading a book silently are two different things, but that one is better than the other. I think that's another way in which Sarah and I are the same, is that we get our hackles up in the presence of condescension. It drives us nuts, absolutely nuts. As a longtime reader of science fiction, a relatively recent convert to romance, and as Sarah is a longtime reader of romance, naturally, we are a little sensitive on the subject of condescension from other people. And on that point, I agree completely. It's a trade-off. It's not like, oh, you only listen to audiobooks, you're not a real reader. You're not reading the book. On that point, I disagree with Sarah from the safety of being hundreds and hundreds of miles away. But it's not a lesser experience. So if that was the thing that was getting her hackles up, then my hackles are up right in synchronicity with it. And then we'll finish up with the last point, which is also agreement. So this isn't really a Throwdown Thursday. In a way, it is, because we disagree on some elements. But the last point that she made was about FOMO, fear of missing out. It was about the pressure that sometimes content creators, I think the last part of her video, the main thrust of her video, was really aimed at other people who make BookTube videos, rather than the people who just watch BookTube but don't make videos of their own. I don't know what percentage of that, how that percentage breaks down on any channel. I often wonder how many people who watch my channel have BookTube channels of their own versus that don't. What would the percentage breakdown be? I don't know. I don't know if there's any way to know. But on this point, I agree completely. Sarah was saying that pressure is bad. It shouldn't happen. You shouldn't go, she points out, she says in her video, you shouldn't go to so-and-so's channel and say, oh, so-and-so has read 35 books this month. I got to hurry up. I feel extra pressure where I didn't feel it before. I heard her say that, and I had two reactions. First, I thought, what? As if I said that I'd only read 35 books this month, I would assume that I'd had a traumatic brain injury. I've read, as of this morning, 91 books this month. I plan on adding a lot to that before the end of the month. But I know her. I take her point. My second reaction was her reaction, which is you shouldn't feel that way. Get rid of that feeling. Uproot it from yourself. Kindly uproot the feeling of FOMO, that horrible feeling of keeping up with the Joneses. Uproot that feeling from yourself and get rid of it, rather than nuking your channel. Okay? Way too many people, especially in the last 2 years, have realized, oh, BookTube, I'm starting to think about all these competitive, semi-competitive things about BookTube, and I don't like it. So I'm just going to nuke my channel. No, you could control yourself. You could get rid of the reaction that you're not liking. You could do that instead of getting rid of your BookTube channel. But that is a point on which Sarah and I'm going to end with agreement. We agree on that point. That you should, like for instance in her video, Sarah mentions that although she defends audiobooks, she largely enjoys reading on one of her 18 e-readers or in a physical book more than she does listening to audiobooks. And that's what she's going to do, because enjoyment is the thing that matters. And on that point, we could not be in any greater agreement. That is what matters. Enjoyment is what matters. If you're reading something and you're not enjoying it, the author is failing you. It's possible that also your preparation or even education is failing you, but at heart, the author is failing you. I know that for a fact that is the main reason, because I have gone into many, many books with no education on the subject and either liked them or hated them depending on the work the author was doing. But if you're reading something and not enjoying it, what are you doing? What are you doing? No, pick the format that you like, pick the kinds of reading that you like, the pace, the amount, the type, and do that. Read for enjoyment is my response to reading enjoyment is exactly the same. Nodding in agreement. an odd way to end Throwdown Thursday, but I'm sure that Sarah and I will disagree far more profoundly in future videos. For the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.